Alright, this is going to be a lengthy one. I'm going to walk you through a common RPL kit document. So if the RTO that you work for uses this type of RPL kit, you're going to probably need a giant mug of coffee or to be tackling this one when you're nice and fresh. So consider yourself fairly warned and pause it at any time. As I said, I'd suggest you put it off till you're nice and fresh. Alright, so we're going to double click on the submission you've received as an assessor. This is Susan's recognised prior learning, and under her assessment plan you can see that it was agreed that she'd look at recognition of prior learning for some of the, actually for all of the delivery modules. So this was just one, the make a presentation. So it's actually the 4 modules that make up, 4 units that make up the delivery module. Alright, so as a primary school teacher, how much is going to be covered and how much will she still have to do in gap training? That's how you have to look at it holistically. You have to say, okay, we're talking about a learner, a trainer and assessor in the workplace, in the VET system, not in the K-12 curriculum. So looking at the whole thing holistically, I'm sure that a lot of her make a presentation type of things could automatically be recognised, so long as she can show us some current teacher registration. So the first thing we do is we look at all the preamble about copyright statements. This is a massive document, guys. So it has all these different sections in here. A lot of it doubles up. So section A is the assessor information. Now, when this was used by the assessor and the candidate, they actually put all of her information in the assessor section A in the wrong spot. So we just modified the form. We just went with it. Section B, candidate information and application forms. Well, this is so explicitly gives you so much information on the processes that you just get lost in text. And you just drown in paperwork. Alright, so then it talks about section C, a competency conversation, and I'm going to show you a flow chart of how all of this happens. So section A is just thorough guidelines for the assessor. Section B, candidate information, so they understand, and all their blank application template forms. Section C is relating to how you capture all of your recordings of the competency conversation. Section D, practical tasks and observation recording sheets. So that's where you're starting to use your tools there to record. And if there was any practical tasks, Section E has a section for that. Section F for third-party verifications. They're just templates for any colleagues that Susan would work with to supplement the evidence. And Section G, finally, the assessment tables. Quite a lot involved. So, assessor information, it basically is a copy and paste of the candidate information in section C. So it has all the preamble. Feel free to have a look at it at your leisure, but I'm just trying to skim you through this to show you and orient you that this is your piece of RPL evidence that you're going to assess now for Susan. So this is the section where each of the units have been mapped out. Okay, so you'll see that there's some design, some delivery, some assessment ones. Well, we've agreed with Susan that she's going to do the questions, the practical and documents as part of the module. So she's not providing the RPL evidence for those ones. So see how they're not available there? It's only ticked for the module type evidence. So all of that's mapped through there. That's something that's been agreed upon. There's information if Susan came to us with older versions of the TAE, she might have had a TAA and needed an upgrade, or even the old BSZ certificate, and all of those rules changing very soon in 2014. So it really isn't as relevant for you now. So we'll just flick past all of this and you can just pray that your RTO doesn't use this particular kit. Alright, this is the flow chart I was telling you about. So this is the overview of the whole RPL process. First of all, they make an application. So at Evoke, they are welcome to email and request recognition of prior learning, and they would receive our RPL kit, which is a little bit more streamlined than this one. So they would receive the kit, and then there's an interview and a document review. So at that initial interview, that's when you agree upon the evidence that's being collected. So we're going to review the documents that Susan has intended to get her hands on, that she believes are easy to access, and we have to be involved in that process as the assessor, because we know what's strong evidence and what just isn't going to be sufficient or even valid, which won't really benefit her as demonstrating vet training. We'll then have we'll actually be able to review what her submissions are, and then meet back with her to have a competency conversation to also see if we can gather some more evidence about her knowledge and skill directly from her. There may be a practical assessment, or there might be enough with the documents and with the competency conversation that that would be sufficient. If with a practical assessment and the conversation there was still gaps there, then there would be some training required. So we've already agreed we're training on Module 1 and Module 3. We're just looking at RPL for Module 2. Once she's then submitted Module 1 and she's found competent in that one, once she's submitted Module 3 and she's competent in that one, and we're happy with her RPL submission for Module 2, and probably the beginning of Module 2 she gets up to the point where it just says stop, teachers stop here. That's probably the gap training that she needs in Module 2. And once that's been assessed, when all of that's completed, then we're in a position, like every other submission, to issue the qualification. And it's the RTO that does that. So the assessor will actually make that recommendation, pass it on to the RTO, and the RTO prints out the certificate for. Alright, so steps in the RPL process. So you can have a good look through this form at your leisure if you really would like to. So this was the part that was in the assessor's information, but this document was used incorrectly by the assessor and the candidate, in the sense that we collected all of the information here. So we've ticked off that we've cited the current teacher's registration, we've seen the CV, she's got some certificates of her teaching that she's done, her degree. And then she's actually provided hard evidence. This is work product of her timetables and lesson plans. So we can just double click in there. You can look at it yourself if you like, or just follow on. So you can see this is her lesson plan. She sticks to time. She's got some ideas of, how those sequences are going to break out there. But once again, this is K-12 curriculum, so we can't tick off everything as a vet trainer. We can only tick off certain things about presenting and time managing. So she's given me an example that she can produce a PowerPoint, and then there was some, now this is more relevant, this is valid. This aquaponics science is primary conference, because she was actually training adults in the workplace. So she was teaching her colleagues. So that is more relevant and could tick off some of the boxes there. Now, when you're new at this, you would be working under a supervising assessor, and they wouldn't let you run with an RPL, or especially an RPL kit this complex, unless you were under supervision. So it doesn't affect the authenticity that I'm supervising you in this assessment piece today and guiding you that, yes, this would be valid. These aren't really valid because it's not a lesson plan based around, the vet industry. It's a K-12, but there's certain performance criterion that's going to allow for. There is her identification documents, and we definitely need to make sure that for authenticity that we're actually eventually going to certify the correct person. So we need to make sure Oh goodness. And so obviously I've created sample versions of those to protect people's privacy. So, you know, this is giving you a look at what we'd be looking at. On the teacher's certificate, we'd be checking to see that it was current. Alright, so happy with her identification and a lot of the documents to date. She also has 2 references, so referees have been given here. So we can open up those and have a little look. So that's actually all been mapped out quite effectively. But if we look deeper at that as far as validity goes, has been involved in assessment moderation QCAT. Well, that's very different to VET assessment. So yes, it was a good try, but it isn't going to be valid because K-12, even the forms that are used, the processes in moderation are very different to the VET forms and the legislation around it. So we can have a bit of a skim and scan of that, but there's limitations on how valid that evidence is going to be. Have a look at the next one. And obviously this process would be taking possibly up to 6 hours to thoroughly go through and map every piece of evidence. That's why RPL is not a shortcut. Using assessor guidelines and any opportunity that your candidate can actually complete the course modules is certainly much easier on an assessor than the whole RPL process. But by law, we have to offer that to our clients. So again, it looks like a carbon copy of the other colleagues, so there really isn't anything new there. They've obviously just shared that form, so we haven't got anything new in that second one, just that we've got 2 people to attest to it. So once again, we've given the candidate some information. You can have a good read through that because it does explain, you know, policies and processes for RPL. This is the interesting bit. We've got the evidence review, the collection method for each unit of competency. So that's a good idea of some mapping again there. And this is the application form now. So all of that technically was supposed to be the assessor guidelines, but that was used to collect evidence in this case for Susan. So this is where we've already collected it above. So what I'd like you to do is just tick that as satisfactory. So you just have to hit caps lock and P, which makes the tick because it's set to Wingdings 2, which creates a little, you know, symbol font instead of letters there from your keyboard. I think I'll just leave that in for you actually. So the conversation with the assessor, there was a recorded conversation. I'll have portions of that available for you just outside of this document, so you can actually see a competency conversation in action. It was a fairly early competency conversation. There was a lot of weaknesses with it, I feel, because there was a lot of leading questions, and the idea is we want to ensure that it's the candidate's own work. It's very hard, you know, crossing over that line between assessment of learning and assessment for learning. So yeah, I'll include that a little bit for you. You can have a bit of a critique of that. Now this is her self-assessment questionnaire. She said that she's conducted those things sometimes, but your supervising assessor is already seeing holistically from the information she's given us to date. Yeah, she assesses competence, but no, not in K-12, not in primary school. That is not workplace competence. So I think what we'll do with this one here is we'll just say that it's not completely satisfactory. All right.